Well, hello once again. We are on part 31 of Where the Book of Mormon Come From, and I'm really glad that you're with me. Certainly very thankful. And we were continuing a study of First Nephi and a critique of it. And what I was trying to show in the last few minutes of the last video is that here you have an unauthorized tribe doing priesthood duties. And that's one of the major problems to me of the Book of Mormon, because it says they are obeying the law of Moses when in fact they're not obeying the law of Moses. And like I said, you can read about this material in my book, Questions About Mormon Doctrine, worldevangelismlibrary.org. So now Campbell, he thought in 1831 it was Smith, but when Mormonism Unveiled came out in 1834, then he finally realized that his former colleague, Sidney Rigdon, was the one responsible. So but otherwise, Campbell has some really good arguments against the Book of Mormon. He says Smith, its real author, is ignorant and impudent, a knave as ever wrote a book, betrays the cloven foot in basing his whole book upon a false fact, or a pretended fact, which makes God a liar. It is this: with the Jews, God made a covenant at Mount Sinai, and instituted a priesthood and a high priesthood. The priesthood he gave to the tribe of Levi, and the high priesthood to Aaron and his sons for an everlasting priesthood. He separated Levi and covenanted to him this office irrevocably while ever the temple stood, or till the Messiah came. Then says God, Moses shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall wait on their priest's office, and the stranger, the person of another family, who cometh nigh shall be put to death. Numbers 3:10. And the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for them the Lord thy God hath chosen to minister unto him and to bless in the name of the Lord. And by their word shall every controversy and every stroke be tried. Deuteronomy 21:5. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, with 250 men of renown, rebelled against a part of the institution of the priesthood, and the Lord destroyed them in the presence of the whole congregation. This was to be a memorial that no stranger invade any part of the office of the priesthood. Numbers 16, verse 40. 14,700 of the people were destroyed by a plague for murmuring against this memorial. In the 18th chapter of Numbers, the Levites are again given to Aaron and his sons, and the priesthood confirmed to them with this threat: the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. Even Jesus, says Paul. Now he's saying, of course, we don't know if Paul wrote the book of Hebrews, but the inspired writer of Hebrews says, were he on earth, could not be a priest, for he was of the tribe concerning which Moses spake, which spake nothing of priesthood. Hebrews 7:13. So irrevocably was the grant of the priesthood to Levi, and of the high priesthood to Aaron, that no stranger dare approach the altar of God, which Moses established. Hence Jesus himself was excluded from officiating as priest on earth according to the law. That Joseph Smith overlooked in his impious fraud and makes his hero Levi spring from Joseph. And just as soon as his sons return with the roll of his lineage, ascertaining that he was of the tribe of Joseph, he and his sons acceptably offer sacrifices and burnt offerings to the Lord. Also, it is repeated, page 18. Nephi became chief artificer, uh, shipbuilder and mariner, was scribe, prophet, priest, and king unto his own people, consecrated Jacob and Joseph, the sons of his father, priests to God and teachers, almost 600 years before the fullness of time of the times of the Jewish economy was completed. Page 72. Nephi represents himself under the law of Moses. They build a temple in the New World, and in 55 years after they leave Jerusalem, make a new priesthood which God approbates. A high priest is also consecrated, and yet they are all the while teaching the law of Moses and exhorting the people to keep it. Thus, God is represented as instituting, approbating, and blessing a new priesthood from the tribe of Joseph, concerning which Moses gave no commandment concerning priesthood. Although God has promised in the law of Moses that if any man not of the tribe and the family of Levi and Aaron should approach the office of priest, he would surely die. He is represented by Smith as blessing, approbating, and sustaining another family in this approbated office. The God of Abraham or Joseph Smith must then be a liar, and who will hesitate to pronounce him an impostor? This lie runs through his records for the first 600 years of his story. And then, like we said, that was purpose of the small plates. So we finally come to 1 Nephi 6:1-6. So we notice that Nephi has been given an introduction to the small plates. And if we understand the background with regards to the loss of the 116 pages, then we receive greater insight why Rigdon and company had to conjure up this idea of the small plates. We've already written about this several times, so I won't comment upon it. Chapter 6, I believe, was not from Spalding. And then the children of men. Remember, this phrase is found 123 times in totality throughout the Book of Mormon 2013 edition. It seems to be a signature phrase used by Rigdon. And I can quote again what Craig Criddle says. Those sections of the Book of Mormon that espouse Rigdon's pre-1830 theological views are connected by more than shared theology. They also share word usage patterns. As just noted, Walter Scott's phrase, Jesus is the Christ, appears in the same locations within the Book of Mormon as the doctrines that Scott espoused and Rigdon adopted in 1828. Another example is the phrase children of men, which is used with exceptional frequency in parts of the Book of Mormon that advocate Rigdon's pre-1830 views, such as his belief in the divine calling, miracles, gifts of spirit, such as the gift of tongues, and spiritual rebirth after baptism by immersion for remission of sins. This particular phrase does not appear in the New Testament, but does appear in the Old Testament, especially in Psalms, where it appears 14 times. Rigdon frequently preached from the Old Testament, and he gave sermons based on Psalms. The phrase children of men also appears in Rigdon's autobiography and the biography of Joseph Smith, which was apparently also written by Rigdon. In the 1830 edition version of the Book of Mormon, the phrase children of men appears 130 times, excluding passages copied from the Bible. Let me make this just a little bit bigger. There are 251,204 words in the Book of Mormon, so the frequency of appearance of this phrase within these sections is 130 divided by 251,000 times 1,000 equals 0.52 per 1,000 words. In those sections of the Book of Mormon that have theological content reflecting Rigdon's pre-1830 views, the frequency of occurrence is considerably higher. For example, 2 Nephi 25 through 33 endorses spiritual rebirth after baptism by immersion for the remission of sins, as well as other beliefs that Rigdon is known to have held prior to 1830. Within these chapters, the phrase children of men appears at a frequency of 3.45 per 1,000 words, 26 times out of 7,530 words total, nearly 7 times the average rate for the Book of Mormon overall, excluding the sections copied from the Bible. Many witnesses reported that in writing manuscript found, Spalding made frequent use of the phrase, and it came to pass. It's useful to compare the frequency of the phrase children of men to the frequency of the phrase came to pass. And in an 1830 version of the Book of Mormon, the phrase came to pass appears at an average frequency of 5.6 times per 1,000 words, 1,402 appearances in 251,204 words, excluding those chapters copied from the Bible, in which it appears just once. And 2 Nephi 25 through 33 contains 7,530 words, so the phrase came to pass would be expected to appear 7,530 times 5.6 divided by 1,000 equals 42 times if it occurred at the same average frequency in these chapters as it does in the Book of Mormon overall. But in these chapters, the phrase came to pass does not appear even once. This is evident against Spalding authorship of 2 Nephi 25 through 33. Now, I will say this. I think it's a little bit flawed reasoning because of the difference in the genre. I mean, the came to pass is going to be used mostly, 9 times out of 10, came to pass is used in the historical narrative. And 2 Nephi 25 through 33 is not historical narrative. It's actually sermonic material. So that's what I'm saying here. But children of men is used in First Nephi, as you can see there in that second bullet point there. And it's also known that Rigdon helped Smith with a supposed translation of the Book of Moses. And this book contains the children of men frequently 13 times. I would ask you to go back and read the first, go back and watch what I said about First Nephi 6, 1 through 6. And the same comments would apply here. That children of men is used also in chapter 9, verse 6, very interesting enough. Hardy states that in chapter 9, he mentions that he has already written a longer, more detailed history of his family, and that the text we are currently reading is a second version commanded by God for a wise purpose in him, which purpose I know not. It is left to readers to make the connection that this purpose was to provide a substitute narrative for the 116 pages of translation to be lost by Martin Harris in 1828. Certainly, Rigdon and company do not want us to forget this wise purpose. Sorry, I should have. That's what I accidentally. Sorry, that should be. I don't know why that got out of whack there. My fault. So that's what I said there. Sorry. The mystery, I've already talked a bit about this from the very first video, friends, that the mystery was revealed in the first 6th century AD. So I won't cover all that again. First Nephi chapter 10 through 16 certainly is in contradiction to what the Bible teaches. Let's go into a little bit detail about this, though. So throughout this major prophecy that Nephi presents, he lets the cat out of the bag. First Nephi 10, 7-9, he discusses specific details concerning the ministry of John the Baptist, which you can see is directly taken from the gospel accounts. First Nephi 10, 12 through 14, Nephi prophesies about the Gentiles receiving the fullness of the gospel, just like Israel has, and thereby steals from Paul's imagery of Romans 11. Nephi then prophesies more about the virgin conception, the miracles of Jesus, and in 1133 saw that Jesus was crucified upon the cross. He then prophesies about the resurrection, and Jesus had 12 apostles. And then I'm going to skip to chapter 13, where it talks about the prophecies of this great abominable church, dressed like a harlot, definitely taken from Revelation 17. Nephi even prophesies about one of the 12 apostles who wrote the book of Revelation named John. And Nephi covers an immense amount of chronological territory designated as the New Testament period. Well, the mystery of God was kept hidden, says the Apostle Paul, until the 1st century AD, and yet it's very obvious that Nephi contradicts Paul. The angels that Peter writes about should have just read 1st Nephi, and they would have known the gospel revealed 600 years before Jesus was born, right? Because they desired to look into those things, and they could have done so when they read 1st Nephi. And then we have the skeleton outline of the New Testament, especially Revelation in these particular chapters. Another major point to make is regards to 1st Nephi 10 through 15 is that Rigdon and company are heavily relying on the New Testament as a skeletal outline, and in particular the book of Revelation. Knowing that Rigdon was very familiar with the Bible, it would not have been hard for him to come up with this material after the loss of the 116 pages in June 1828. And that would be the range of existing from August of 1828 to at least the end of March 1829, which would have given him around 8 months. First, Rigdon and company make allusions near the beginning of Matthew's gospel and John's gospel in regards to the ministry of John the Baptist. And Rigdon uses the illustration Paul uses in Romans 11, like we talked about, the olive tree and the wild olive tree representing the Jews and Gentiles. Second, there's an emphasis again to the ministry of John the Baptist using the gospel accounts. Third, Jesus is called the Lamb many times throughout this section, which is taken from John and also Revelation. John the Apostle uses concerning Jesus to refer to him as the ultimate antitype of animal sacrifices in the Gospel of John and Revelation. Fourth, there is the 12 apostles of the Lamb, which is used in Revelation 21:14. The phrase made white in the blood of the Lamb is in Revelation 7:14. The phrase the great and abominable church definitely corresponds to the great harlot Babylon the Great in Revelation 17. And actually, it's a common view in that century that Babylon the Great was the Roman Catholic Church. And I wonder if that was adopted into that. Fifth, Nephi prophesies that John, an apostle of the Lamb, is going to write the book of Revelation. And then sixth, Nephi is carried away in the Spirit, just like John was carried away in the Spirit in the book of Revelation. And then there's a specific timing of Nephi's prophecy of the arrival of the Messiah. Remember, we talked about that, unlike Benjamin and Mosiah, who did not know exactly when he would come. He says, "Yeah, even 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem, a prophet would the Lord God raise up among the Jews, even a Messiah." And why is it the case that Nephi specifically knew that when the Messiah was due to arrive, but the prophets on the Messiah who come after are more generic? They say, by the time it's coming, it's not far distant. Could they not have read the plates that have been passed down? Certainly. And this would fit the apostles better than when the crisis of those 116 pages occurred. Then Mosiah would continue to be translated, in which the prophets were generic about the coming of Christ. Then it got more specific as the time drew near, as is seen with Samuel the Lamanite, where he says 5 more years are to come. And then when Rigdon finished Mosiah through Moroni, then when he went back to first Nephi, he forgot to let Nephi be generic in the prophecy of the coming of Christ, but instead he let Nephi be more specific, and thus allowing this awkwardness of specific timing, generic timing, and then specific timing of the first coming of Christ. And then 1 Nephi 19, God commands Nephi to make new plates made from ore. But this presents a problem, though, as Braden says. While they were in the wilderness before building the ship, Nephi was told to make brass plates. One of two things is certain. Either he had to dig up copper and zinc, smelt them, and manufacture brass plates, and that without tools to do it, for they had fled from Jerusalem with nothing but tents and provisions. Or he wrote on nothing, or made the plates out of nothing. On landing in America, the Mormon God is so careful about having impostor Joe get these plates that he orders Nephi to make some more plates. Gold, silver, and copper are mentioned, but no zinc. But Nephi has got used to making things out of nothing, and it was no trick at all for him to make copper without zinc, building furnaces, work mines, make machine shops without tools, and nothing to do it with. And then Hardy says this: some 30 years after the family left Jerusalem, and probably 20 years after their arrival in the Promised Land, Nephi was surprised by a new commandment from God to write yet another history of the family, one that would highlight the ministry and the prophecies, the more plain and precious parts of them. 1 Nephi 19. And this is once again going to discuss the small plates. That is, the things that were particularly pleasing unto God. Nephi believed that this record would be valuable for the instruction of his descendants and also perhaps for some other unknown purpose, which turned out to be replacing the first 116 pages of the Book of Mormon manuscript lost by Martin Harris. And like I said, Rigdon and company have now brought this to our attention 3 times, and I think it should be sunk in our minds by now. First Nephi 20 through 22, filler material of Isaiah. It's pretty clear that that's what he was doing, and he actually tries to discuss the regathering of the house of Israel. And like we said, Rigdon liked to repurpose and give a different interpretation to Old Testament passages, just like he did with Malachi chapter 3. We already looked at this, but I want to show you again. I think this is very interesting, the contradiction of Malachi. So it says, for behold, saith the prophet, the time cometh speedily that Satan shall have no more power over the hearts of the children of men. For the day soon cometh that all the proud and they who do wickedly shall be as stubble, and they cometh that they must be burned. Then you go to verse 23, for the time speedily shall come that all churches which are built up to get gain, and all those who are built up to get power over the flesh, and those who are built up to become popular in the eyes of the world, and those who seek the lust of the flesh and the things of the world, and to do all manner of iniquity. Yea, and find all those who belong to the kingdom of the devil are they who need fear and tremble and quake. They are those who must be brought low in the dust. They are those who must be consumed as stubble. And this is according to the words of the prophet. Which prophet? Malachi. And notice what Hardy says. What prophet is being discussed? No doubt it is Malachi. This is what, even Grant Hardy in his footnotes recognizes 1 Nephi 22:15 as referring to Malachi 4:1 and 1 Nephi 22 verse 23 as referring to referencing Malachi 4 verse 1. You can look this up on page 59 and 60. Now, what's interesting to me, friends, is the first major problem recognizes that Malachi had not been written down yet. I've said this before. Nephi's writing this down in 600 BC, but Malachi didn't come on the scene until 400 years before Christ was born. So that's 200 years too late. And then the second major problem is actually found in 3rd Nephi, when Jesus, because the Nephites in America, he expounded on Malachi and to them in 3rd Nephi 25. And in 3rd Nephi 26, it says, now it came to pass that when Jesus had told these things, he expounded them unto the multitude, and he did expound all these things unto them, both great and small. And he said, these scriptures which ye had not with you, the Father commanded I should give unto you, for it was wisdom in him, they should be given unto future generations. So Sidney, or others, Oliver Cowdery, probably who helped him, had forgotten that after he finished 3rd Nephi, that when it came to revisiting the lost pages, 1st Nephi through the words of Mormon, he forgot that he allowed Nephi to quote Malachi in 1st Nephi and 2nd Nephi, and then the phrase where the plates were passed down from generation to generation, as we have already seen, and so the claim cannot be made that the plates were lost over the centuries when they were passed down. And then another great problem is this, and which is also found in other places in the Book of Mormon. 3 days of darkness at Jesus' crucifixion, which is another contradiction. It says, and the God of our fathers, who were led out of Egypt, out of bondage, and also were preserved in the wilderness by him, yea, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of the God of Jacob, yieldeth himself, according to the words of the angel, as a man into the hands of wicked men, to be lifted up, according to the words of Zanach, and to be crucified, according to the words of Neum, and to be buried in a sepulchre, according to the words of Zenos, which he spake concerning the 3 days of darkness, which should be a sign given of his death unto those who should inhabit the isles of the sea, more especially given unto those who are of the house of Israel. 3rd Nephi 8:3. And the people began to look with great earnestness for the sign which had been given by the prophet Samuel the Lamanite, yea, for the time that there should be darkness for the space of 3 days over the face of the land. And there began to be great doubtings and disputations among the people, notwithstanding so many signs had been given. And that clearly contradicts the Bible, where this says that there was only 3 hours of darkness there when Jesus was on the cross for 6 hours. So it's interesting that this contradiction is found in both places of the timeline of the translation process. That third Nephi would have been translated first, and then when the small plates section was being translated, the same error was repeated. And then J.M. Washburn says, the large plates, as we all know, were devoted to the recording of the wars and contentions, the travels, political affairs, all things secular. The small plates, on the other hand, dealt with the preachings and prophesyings of religious matters. It is a strange commentary that there were more wars and contentions than preachings and prophesyings. And I agree with that. We read this part here already, so I won't say that again, and you could read it for yourself if you like. Grant Hardy says on page 58, 59, the tale of Lehi's family and their journey to the New World ends abruptly at 1st Nephi 18. Of the remaining 37 chapters of 1st and 2nd Nephi, only one consists primarily of narrative, 2nd Nephi 5. The rest are made up of quotations from discourses of Lehi and Jacob, Nephi's younger brother. Whole chapters borrow from Isaiah, Nephi's own reflections and interpretations of Scripture, and original prophecies. Aside from this single chapter of 2nd Nephi 5, Nephi tells us nothing of life in the Americas. Even though we know that he was made king over his people, he provides no information about his reign, policies, challenges, or successes. For the entire period of his kingship, no specific events are mentioned, no individuals are described, no interactions are reported. The only dates in the last 37 chapters occur in that one anonymous section, where Nephi notes that sometime between the 30th and 40th year after their flight from Jerusalem, he was commanded to write a second version of his personal history, one that highlighted spiritual matters. And as a result, most of his record consists of undated, contextless excerpts, along with reflection on his religious experiences related to the remote past and the distant future. The contrast with the strict chronological march through Nephite history in the portion of the book narrated by Mormon is striking, and I would agree. Though one wonders what Nephi's original count from the large plates, the pages lost by Martin Harris, might have looked like. I mean, I really thank Mr. Hardy for really. He's actually helping us out. In my own personal opinion. I mean, to talk about here the journey ending abruptly at 1st Nephi 18. That for 2nd Nephi 5 is the only chapter that really talks about a historical narrative, because remember, if you're trying to rework a narrative, if you're trying to rework the pages, you don't want to contradict yourself. And then whole chapters borrow from Isaiah. I mean, it's definitely filler material, right? And the entire period of his kingship, no specific events are mentioned, right? And then, the reason why there's such a strict chronological march through Nephite history in the portion narrated by Mormon was because mostly that part is by Spalding. While this part here, the small plates, is by Rigdon himself. When Nephi the first prophesied that Christ would show himself among the Nephites, he did so in terms that appear in the book of Malachi. So I think that's kind of interesting. After the Messiah shall come, there shall be signs given unto my people of his birth, and also of his death and resurrection. And great and terrible shall that day be unto the wicked, for they shall perish. Wherefore, all those who are proud, and they that do wickedly, the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, for they shall be as stubble. So even he admits that this looks like it's referring to Malachi. But the Son of Righteousness, very interesting that, the book of Malachi has S-U-N, not S-O-N. But the Son of Righteousness shall appear unto them, and he shall heal them, and they shall have peace with him until 3 generations have passed away, and many of the 4th generation shall have passed away in righteousness. So my point is that, once again, Malachi is being used here. Now, if you look at all of what we've talked about here, this is why I think chapter 1:1 through 3:19, you have Spalding. It's historical narrative. The I Nephi phrase is used quite a bit. King of Past is found 27 times. You have various names and places. And then, interesting enough, we do see some scriptures referenced here, and it's possible that Spalding may have used some of these, but probably also Rigdon did it also. And I talked about chapter 3, verse 20, Rigdon, how that's from Acts 3:21. And then we have First Nephi chapter 6, 4 through 6, 6. And I think that Rigdon, if we were to be honest with ourselves, that's probably Rigdon because of the mentioning of the small plates and using children of men. And then First Nephi 7:1 through 7:12, probably Spalding. I Nephi is found and different character names. First Nephi 7:12b, possibly Rigdon because he uses children of men there. First Nephi 7:13 through 10:3, Spalding because it's historical narrative and the kingdom passes 26 times. First Nephi 9:6, remember is I believe using the small plates mentioning, so it's probably Rigdon. And then in chapter 10, 4 through 16, 3, definitely to me is talking about Rigdon. And possibly that Rigdon was writing in the style, or trying to mimic the style of Spalding. And it's interesting that, notice that this covers 6 chapters, right? And just notice all those verses that are used from the New Testament, even before they're written down. It's sermonic material. So that's just my personal opinion and historical investigation about this. First Nephi 16:4 through 19:6, probably most likely Spalding. Uses I Nephi quite a few times. Kingdom passes 60 times found throughout. You have all the mention of those names there, and as you can see, there's a few phrases that are found from the Bible. And then First Nephi 19:7-24 is Rigdon. Notice there's no narrative material. Once again, it is, I believe, sermonic material. And then First Nephi 20:21 is Isaiah, filler material. And then First Nephi 22:1 through 31 is Rigdon. It's not narrative material. Kingdom Pass is only found one time. And notice that it quotes from these scriptures. All right, let's go to Second Nephi now. So in Second Nephi, it says, in the revised version of his autobiography, Nephi appears oddly disconnected from the present. He's willing to share details of 2 or 3 decades earlier, when Lehi was leading the family through the wilderness, but he shows little interest in more recent events. The people he rules over, or even his own family members, as mentioned earlier, his wife and children are virtually absent from his account, much to the frustration of those who would like to read modern Mormon family values back into the Book of Mormon. Nephi seems obsessed with the past. I think that's interesting that he writes that. We've already observed how he uses allusions to link his personal history to the biblical stories of Joseph and Moses. Indeed, he sees Lehi's clan as reenacting sacred history as they deal with sibling rivalries and are led by God to the promised land. And yet Nephi, as portrayed in the Book of Mormon, is not so much a storyteller as a writer. He allows us to observe his composing, editing, and revising as he tries to imagine who his future audience might be. Then J.M. Washburn, a Mormon author, says this: the book of 2nd Nephi is somewhat less direct than 1st Nephi, though easy to follow. Chapters 1 through 3 are made up of the teachings of Lehi, given both directly by Lehi himself and by his son Nephi. Chapter 4 contains Nephi's comments on his father's ministry, and direct quotations are used. It also contains some words of Nephi. Chapter 5 is also from Nephi. Chapter 6 through 11 brings a new development, the teachings of Nephi's younger brother Jacob, though it is still the book of Nephi. Chapter 7 and 8 are quotations from the brass plates, following closely Isaiah 50 and 51. Chapters 12 through 24 are practically the same as Isaiah 2 through 14. Chapters 25 through 33 are made up of the prophecies and testimony of Nephi. And then George Arbach says this: 2nd Nephi is almost entirely a Rigdonian production, although there are a few elements which are characteristic of Spalding. It gives detailed prophecies of Christ, of America being the land of the Gentiles, you shall have no kings, of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, a day of Masonic abominations, and Isaiah 2 through 14 and 29 are inserted and distorted predictions of Mormonism. And as you can see here, friends, look at all the verses that are found from the New Testament. That are found in the Book of Mormon. So, I just want to, that have not been written down yet. And like I said, those are found in my book if you'd like to get it from the website. Second, notice the theological material given through these chapters. There's not much historical narrative, as even admitted by pro writers such as Hardy. Third, notice the filler material by inserting a lot of chapters of Isaiah can take together to take up the space. Nephi 7, 2 Nephi 7 and 8, 12 through 24 and 27. Fourth, there's a key phrase, children of men, mentioned 36 times, as found many times throughout 2 Nephi. That could be a possible link to Rigdon. Fifth, notice there's not much new characters, places added. Now, in its defense, the book's main focus is on Lehi and his family, so there should not be any expectations of new places or characters. But as Hardy states, that Nephi seems obsessed with the past and does not want to deal with the present. Why is this the case? Well, as I would say, the less vague details one gives, the harder it will be to detect a falsehood. And then Grant Hardy says this on page 50 and 51. He says, even more telling is Nephi's missing blessing. At the end of his life, following the pattern of the biblical patriarch Jacob, Lehi gathered his kin around him to give counsel and blessings. The recipients included Laman, Lemuel, Sam, and the sons of Ishmael, Zoram, Jacob, Joseph, the children of Laman, children of Lemuel, again, the sons of Ishmael and Sam. Nephi concludes, and it came to pass after my father Lehi had spoken unto all his household, according to the feelings of his heart and the spirit of the Lord which was in him, he waxed old, and it came to pass that he died and was buried. Nephi's blessing is conspicuous for its absence, despite his admission that Lehi had spoken to all his household and precedents in the Hebrew Bible. Why doesn't Nephi report what his father said to him? On page 77 through 78, here's what Grant Hardy also says. Let me make this just a little bigger so you can see it. In the third chapter of 2 Nephi, he records Lehi's last words to his youngest son Joseph. This is an important chapter whose significance is highlighted by its anomalous nature. This is the only time that Lehi quotes from the brass plates, and it is also the only passage in the Book of Mormon in which Nephi's brother Joseph receives direct attention, or is even mentioned apart from his brother Jacob. Lehi tells his son that the biblical Joseph saw their day and their family, and that the plates contained a prophecy in which the Lord had promised him that the fruit of thy loins shall write, and the fruit of the loins of Judah shall write, and that which shall be written by the fruit of thy loins, and also that which shall be written by the fruit of the loins of Judah shall grow together unto the confounding of false doctrines, and bring them to the knowledge of their fathers in the latter days, and also to the knowledge of my covenants. Most of this prophecy actually concerns the seer, always understood by Mormons to be Joseph Smith, who would bring forth this record in the last days. But here again is a prediction of a scripture written by some of Joseph of Egypt's descendants, in this context clearly referring to the Nephites that would at some future date stand alongside the Bible. Now it's interesting because this is, like I've said before, Rigdon also decides to insert himself. And this is when he would have done so in the small plates. And we know that in later history that Rigdon does become the spokesman on behalf of Smith. And history bears out this truth repeatedly. Rigdon, to me, has been caught. I mean, you see Doctrine and Covenants 100 verses 9 through 12. And it's expedient in me that you, my servant Sidney, should be a spokesman unto this people. Yea, verily I will ordain you unto this calling, even to be a spokesman unto my servant Joseph. And I will give unto him power to be mighty in testimony, and I will give unto thee power to be mighty in expounding all scriptures, that thou mayest be a spokesman unto him, and he shall be a revelator unto thee, that thou mayest know the certainty of all things pertaining to the things of my kingdom on the earth. Now, this is, I think, interesting what Argbog says. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Before Rigdon came on the scene, Joseph Smith had achieved some prestige among a certain class of people. He had proved himself a fitting person for the role of prophet, and his ignorance led Rigdon to believe that he would be a pliable tool. But the very characteristics which led to his selection as a prophet were contrary to Rigdon's plans. You remember how we talked about Washburn? How he had a talk with some guy from California who was writing a book, and he said, Washburn asked him, well, why would Rigdon play second fiddle to Joseph Smith? And the guy replied by saying, well, Rigdon didn't know his man very well. And I believe that's kind of correct because, as Argbog goes on to say, even in theory, Rigdon attempted to establish for all time his own office. While he delegated the office of prophet to another, he formed another office, that of spokesman, for himself, believing that through it he could exercise the real determining influence showing conclusively that he was the author of this idea and responsible for its formal doctrinal adoption, is the following revealing statement made by him when he was 80 years old. For the existence of that church, there had to be a revelator, one who received the word of the Lord, a spokesman, one inspired of God to expound all revelation, so that the church might all be of one faith. The idea Rigdon put into the Book of Mormon is, and the Lord said unto me also, I will raise up unto the fruit of thy loins, and I will make for him a spokesman, and behold, I will give unto him that he shall write the writing of the fruit of thy loins, Joseph Smith, unto the fruit of thy loins, and the spokesman of thy loins, Rigdon, shall declare it. The division of labor. Let me make this a little bit bigger. The division of labor was suggested by that of Moses and Aaron, and in fact, Joseph is promised as a Moses in the Book of Mormon passage, which refers to him having a spokesman. In Mormon history, this comparison of Joseph Smith and Moses appear repeatedly, and once Joseph gave this very interesting expression of the theory of offices. Moses was a stammering sort of a boy like me. God said to him, Thou shalt be a God unto Aaron, and he shall be thy spokesman. Joseph was no stammerer. This was simply a recognition of the fact that he was a Moses, slow of speech, while Rigdon was an oratorical spokesman like Aaron. For a year or so, this division of office was acceptable. God even confirmed this division of labor by telling Sidney, I will give unto thee power to be mighty in spouting all scriptures, that thou mayest be a spokesman unto him, Joseph, and he shall be a revelator unto thee, that thou mayest know the certainty of all things. Rigdon had failed to reckon with the personality of his prophet, however, and he had great difficulty in even maintaining the theory of his office. For Joseph got in the habit of announcing from the pulpit at Kirtland, the truth is good enough without dressing up, but Brother Rigdon will now proceed to dress it up. So we're going to stop there because there's a couple other points we want to make with regards to this. Sorry to stop it in such a middle of an idea, but it's very important. I want to keep these videos at least under an hour. So we'll come back to this. I really appreciate you being with us. Thank you.